But now let's get into our Easter Sunday service, and we're going to start with a Bible reading. Matt will be up speaking to us a bit later, and he has asked for a reading from John 20, verses 24 to 31. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name.
Good morning, everyone. As Hel said, my name is Matt. I'm one of the leaders here at MCC. Again, I'd like to offer everyone a very special welcome. It's so good of you to join us. An extra big welcome to you. If this is your first time, that's great. If this is your last time, I don't know really what to say to that. I hope it's voluntary, for starters. Secondly, look, there'll be someone else up here next week if that helps. I won't take it personally. It's me, it's not you. The main thing is that hopefully you find yourself in some church sometime soon. That's the main thing. I don't know exactly what led you to come along this morning. Maybe you're someone who has been part of this church for literally 30 years now. That's great. Maybe you're just doing the polite thing and you didn't want to kind of gently disappoint the person who extended the invitation to come along because it's Easter Sunday this morning as well. So either way, I just wanted to kind of say that the fact that you're even here in this room in 2025 in Australia is a big deal. I think a big deal. It's so easy, I think, if you're like me, just to find at times that, again, here and now, in our time and place, there's nothing really beyond what we can detect with our five senses and what can be proved by the scientific method. Anything beyond the material world that we see, that we're familiar with. It's wishful thinking at best, let alone being here to mark and celebrate what we believe as the literal bodily resurrection of a man who died, who was murdered. That seems to be a strange thing to be celebrating at this time and place. And look, I know, if you already believe, then you can hear that story of Carlos and go, come on, man, just believe the dog. The dog's trying to actually tell you something on behalf of God. Just believe the dog. But life's more complicated than that. If you've had bad experiences with spirituality or maybe bad experiences with dogs, you aren't going to be so prone, perhaps, to, again, receive the message the way that you would and see it as being so obvious, perhaps, if you already believe. So I just want to say, it's not always easy. And the text that I chose this morning for the talk acknowledges that. And again, take some comfort. It's amazing, and this, I think, just shows how realistic the Gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the accounts of Jesus' life and death and resurrection are, that at least 3 out of the 4 at the end mention people doubting, even after they'd seen the resurrected Christ, or not believing, or being scared. Yeah, and I think that actually gives them credence. That actually speaks to their credibility as opposed to just being propaganda saying everyone saw Jesus and believed. So it's not always easy. There are 3 areas of life, at least for me, 3 questions that I have that sometimes get in the way of my belief, that sometimes, if you serve as speed humps still. And I don't think I'm alone here. I reckon some of these are going to be yours as well, whether you call yourself a Christian or not. So here they are, 3 questions that make it hard. Isn't it the case that the more that we learn about the universe through science, the less evidence there is for God? Number 1. Number 2, are people really that kind of specialist species? Is humanity really that much of a big deal? Are we really made in God's image the way that kind of standard Christianity says? And then the third one, if there's a God out there, why don't more people like me have more experiences of the divine or the supernatural? Like, why are there more Carloses in my life? They're the three things like that get in my way sometimes. Now, I recently read a great book by a guy called Ross Douthat. He's a New York Times columnist and author, and he's tackled some of these questions. So a lot of this stuff is straight from him. I'd strongly recommend the book. It's fantastic. It's recent. It's really, really well written. And it's not for a religious audience. So here are some responses to these three questions that I found hopeful, and my hope and prayer is that you find them hopeful too. So like number one, has modern science made God redundant? Again, because this seems to be like the general mood, if you like. Well, maybe you'll find it interesting to know or be reminded that many people actually point to the fact that the more that we learn about the universe and our world through science, the more plausible it becomes that there's actually some kind of creator or designer behind it all. For example, I learned recently that there's this thing called the cosmological constant, which governs the speed at which the universe expands. And the critical thing about this constant is that if it was a little bit less or a little bit more, it would lead to the universe as we know it either collapsing upon itself or just kind of breaking apart at the seams. So either way, if this had been adjusted just a little bit either way, it would have made life as we know it, our version of life, virtually impossible. And people have calculated the chance of things being just right, this constant being just right. And the result is that they say that the range for this thing to be perfect as it is for life is a 1 in 10 to the 120th power of occurring. So that's like the chance. So it is that improbable, a 1 in 10 to the power of 120th, that it just randomly happened. And I was curious as to what 1 in 10 to the power of 120th looked like. So I Googled it, and that's it. Like that's the odds. So if you believe in the laws of evolution, which maybe you do, that's perfectly fine, then even then there seems to be a very precise set of preconditions already in place for that evolutionary process to occur. And some would say, well, again, like maybe this occurred for us because we are just one universe in the multiverse. So if there's thousands and thousands of other universes out there, it was only a matter of time before eventually we hit upon this and modern life and life as we know it has occurred. So maybe it's that, maybe it's the multiverse. But even if there is a multiverse beyond the Marvel franchise, the same question can be asked of it as can be asked of evolution. Like, what caused the multiverse? What was the first cause? How do you explain its existence? How does something that complicated first come into being? Does that make sense? So it seems reasonable, given that, and other features of our universe that scientists refer to as being Goldilocks. So not too hot, not too cold, just right for our kind of existence, just right for this kind of life. It seems reasonable to be open that there was something, a creator, a designer, something beyond the material, beyond that. So that's the first issue. Secondly, for me, sometimes I wonder, well, what about humanity? Again, are we really that special as Christianity typically teaches? Sometimes when I look around the world, particularly now, I doubt that. And I don't know, I can't speak for you, but maybe when you're at Easter lunch and you're looking across the table, maybe you'll start to doubt that too. I don't know. But as Douthat points out, if I'm the result of, again, blind chance, if I evolved to this point simply to kind of pass on my gene pool, if we are absolutely alone on this rock, just flying through space, biding our time until our inevitable deaths, then honestly, if that's it, then I feel a little bit overqualified and underwhelmed. What's the point of someone like me being able to even conceptualize something like a multiverse? Because as far as I know, the perpetuation of my gene pool isn't dependent upon that. I'm a bit overqualified. Why do I contemplate both mortality and morality? Why am I self-aware enough that I can have these different versions of an idealised Matt that I sometimes find myself working towards? If in the overall scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, then again, I feel like it's too much. I'm not really fit for purpose. I love my dog, Wilson. But I think one really important way in which we're different is that Wilson isn't self-aware to the degree that I am, right? Or self-conscious. So, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I take him to the vet. And he's told by this complete stranger that he's overweight, like to his face, like time and time and time again, And as far as I'm aware, like Wilson isn't at risk of developing body image issues. That, in fact, he comes home and I feed him and he doesn't look at me and go, man, this is some kind of toxic relationship. Like they tell me that I'm overweight, you keep on feeding me. Like that doesn't happen. Like Wilson, I don't think he sits there and wonders, I wonder if there are houses beyond this one. And I had this drive to explore them. I wish that I could drive. I could watch the YouTube videos, learn how to drive, only to jump in the car and discover that my paws aren't really great for turning the steering wheel. Like that's not his issue. He's completely content. He is fit for purpose. He's evolved to the point where he can be a dog, enjoy himself and procreate. Apart from the fact that we kind of ruined that party for him early on, right? but do you see what I mean? He doesn't suffer the same kind of frustration that I may. So we humans, relative to other species, we seem to be unique. Again, we are specifically designed with both this capacity and this drive to explore, to study, to find out more about the universe. And what's incredible is that actually pays off. It works. Duthat says it's like we're a key and the world is a lock and we fit. We fit really, really well. And maybe, again, that is just some kind of blind, evolutionary kind of non-design chance. But again, if that's the case, it seems odd because we are overqualified if that is the case. So maybe actually, in reality, that's a feature and not a bug of what it means to be human. And thirdly, maybe also you're like me in the sense that you haven't had a tangible, stereotypical experience of the supernatural or divine. Like me, despite wanting to, right? So I'm certainly open to that. Maybe you are too. But maybe that's put you at risk of being skeptical of that ever happening to anyone at all. Now, there's a pretty famous story from 2014, and apologies if you've heard it already. There was this German woman who was raised by her mother in Germany and largely her grandfather as well, really close to her grandfather. Grandfather dies when she's 16, and just before then, he gives her like a 1978 Philips radio because he wants to develop her love of music. So fast forward, she moves to California in the 2010s to marry her American fiancé, yeah? And one of the things that she takes is this radio. And the fiancé knows how much this radio means to his soon-to-be wife, that he does everything he can to fix it. New batteries, soldering, take to the technicians, nothing. They can't get this radio to work. So 2014, they get married. They go to the courthouse for the official bit, come back to their home for the ceremony. And she's feeling lonely because it's mostly his friends, his family. She's got all her relatives back there in Germany. And then suddenly she grabs her now husband and says, can you hear that music? Can you hear that music? Where's that music coming from? And she hears a love song. So does he. And they go through all the house. There's no stereo one. There's no iPod, whatever. They come to this drawer, and tucked away in the back of the drawer is this 1978 radio, and it's playing. It's playing a love song. And other people at the ceremony heard this as well. So it was verified by these other witnesses. And it played all that day. It played classical music all that night, and then in the morning, dead. And that was it. That was it. Now, that's a crazy story, right? That is a crazy story. But here's the kicker, right? The husband in that story was an avowed atheist. He was literally, still is the editor of a magazine, a periodical called Skeptical Inquirer. He wasn't prepared for it. He wasn't a fervent religious person. He wasn't even open. He wasn't agnostic, right? He was completely against religion. Didn't believe a word of it. This happened to him. And he's gone on record multiple times saying how much that rocked his worldview. Now, that's just one notable example, and I know it's an extreme example, but even, again, in similar veins, in the US, the number of inquiries for the services of exorcists, professional exorcists, is on the up and up and up, despite the numbers of people involved in institutional religion, including the Catholic Church, going down, 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 yeah? More and more people are having near-death experiences and reporting stuff on the other side. And like that makes sense to me because technology is getting better and better, medical technology. Maybe before then it was just more death experiences rather than near-death experiences, right? But that's what people are reporting. You can jump on the world's most popular podcast and you'll hear like celebrities talk about these transcendental, supernatural experiences that they've had. So even if you're like me and you haven't had an experience of this nature, don't dismiss that it can and does happen to other people, and it may still even happen to you. And this is the really important thing, they are often happening in cultures and environments and contexts where they are not wanted, not expected. They aren't primed for this stuff. It's happening despite what they believe, yeah? You can't just write it off as, well, this person was already religious and they were secretly always wishing for it. No. It's happening to people who actually don't want it to happen. And that's something. That's something. Maybe, just maybe, there are examples of God reaching out to people, to humans. So what science continues to reveal about our universe, the unique capabilities and inclinations of human beings particularly, there's still not infrequent experiences of the supernatural and the transcendent that people undergo. All these things may be pointing to the actual existence of the divine, the immaterial, rather than away from it. Does that make sense? But you understandably may be still doubting. You may be skeptical, or you may be feeling burnt out by religion. You may have consider yourself a Christian for years now, but on the brink of burning out. And I personally don't believe that I or anyone else can argue anyone into believing in God. I think it requires more than that. But still, if you've made it this far, you're here in a church service on an Easter Sunday, celebrating the resurrection of the God-man Jesus, then I'd encourage you, out of all the options that are on your table, either start or continue pursuing Jesus. Start or continue pursuing Jesus. Because if nothing else, again, compared to the plethora of options out there, Jesus can more than handle the doubts, the concerns that you may have about the supernatural. So think back to that passage that we heard read out from John's Gospel. You've got the famous disciple, Thomas. He was one of Jesus' inner circle, the 12 apostles. His peers had seen Jesus raised from the dead, but Thomas isn't buying it. Unless I see the nail marks, unless I can literally put my finger into the wound in his side, I'm not going to believe it. About 7 days later, Jesus appears again to them, including Thomas. And get this is the important part. He offers Thomas exactly what he needed to believe. He offers Thomas exactly what he needed to believe. And then Jesus affirms his faith, his trust. The best translation is a statement, not a question. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Because you have seen me, you have believed. I think if nothing else, that shows us that Jesus is not going to scorn you. He's not going to chide you. He's not going to be disappointed with you for sometimes having doubts or concerns about who he is. He didn't reject Thomas despite Thomas being the one person who didn't believe, even when everyone else did. He didn't send Thomas a message saying, listen, Thomas, here's what you do. Just like try harder, okay? Just try harder. Have more faith, try harder, and then I'll get back to you. Jesus doesn't dismiss us because of our doubts or our misgivings. Now, he eventually wants us to stop doubting and believe, but if we act in good faith, I think you've got to believe he meets us where we are, and he will eventually give us what we need to overcome those doubts. And look at Thomas here. He's seemingly the only guy in the room who hasn't had the big, buzzy religious experience everyone else had, seeing Jesus. The disciples, though being convinced that Jesus is alive, they aren't exactly part of the winning team, right? Like, there's only a couple of them. Their leader was only killed by the state literally 2 weeks ago. And they still don't really have the numbers to technically constitute a big popular religious uprising. They're not a religion yet. They're not even a sect yet. Like, they've got the numbers to maybe be like a small cult on a good day. That's it. The point is that now would be a natural time for Thomas, given his doubts and disbelief, and he's being alienated from his close friends because, again, he hasn't had the big experience. This would be a natural time for him to bail, to jump ship, to go. You can imagine, look, I was young, all my friends were really into it, everyone was kind of dabbling with religion, and it wasn't all bad. I feel like I've really grown as a person through it. But look at verse 26 there. A week later, his disciples were in the house again and Thomas was with them. Notice, Thomas isn't bundled up with the rest of the disciples here. It's the disciples plus Thomas. John, the author, is pointing out there's already some distance, some separation between Thomas and his peers. But here's the thing. Thomas is still there. Thomas is still turning up. It's like, mate, you quit the band. You said that we were never going to make it, but you still turned up to rehearsals. Like, what is that all about? Everyone else told him that they'd seen Jesus. A guy had been crucified, dead and buried again just a couple of weeks ago. So presumably they'd still be talking about it pretty excitedly in Thomas's company. He was going to hear the same old stories about things that he'd never experienced. But maybe, despite his doubt and misgivings, he thought it was worth the risk to put himself in an environment where he'd most likely experience Jesus. And maybe, even seemingly, Jesus met him there and gave him, again, exactly what he needed to believe. So what about you? Christian or not, you may be feeling burnt out or skeptical right now. You could be on the brink of either jumping in or giving the whole thing away. Either way, I've tried to make the case that there's something beyond the material. Science has revealed something about our universe being just right for our kind of life. Our capabilities and our inclinations as humans can be seen, again, to point to a power beyond. And then there's the supernatural experiences that many people experience that suggest that perhaps there's something beyond just this life. And if there's even a remote chance, just even like a remote chance that any of this is true, surely it's worth you investigating it. Because we're talking about possible life after death. We're talking about something that will give both profound meaning and purpose to life and a way to help mitigate life's inevitable sufferings. I know we've all got Netflix queues to work through and we've got holidays to plan, but this really is the stuff of life. John writes in that passage that Jesus came to bring people life. And earlier in that same book, he says it isn't just life with a small L, it's life to the full. This is life and life to the full. It's a life that conquers death through bodily resurrection. Life where eventually good will triumph over evil and all wrongs will be put right. A life where our very real guilt and the culpability, the moral culpability things that we carry for doing the wrong thing, for hurting other people and ourselves, the wrongs, that will be dealt with. And lastly, where we are given the real power to change over time, slowly. So start, please, or continue with Jesus. Today was just a small snapshot of his love and his grace. Now, you may have issues with the historical accuracy of the Gospels and his physical resurrection. And that's completely okay. People have had issues and concerns about that for thousands of years now. So there are some responses to that. You may understandably be really perturbed by the very real evil, suffering, and bad that you see in the world. And again, I'd say, although that is distressing and it makes sense to me, take some hope from it, because the very fact that you've decided that you're capable of making a moral judgment between good and evil, as opposed to just your personal preferences and opinions, that could actually point to the fact that you've sensed, you've intuited, there is a larger, more powerful being who actually determines what is right and wrong, good or evil, as opposed to merely human opinion and the consensus of the crowds. Does that make sense? That's a good sign if you're distressed by the very real evil you see in the world. And there are well thought out Christian responses to that too. So don't just close the door on it. Be like Thomas. Despite your doubts, despite your misgivings, place yourself within a group of people who are pursuing the same thing. That is, join a church. Could be this one. Could be the one down the road. You may be thinking, church, come on, man. What with the conformity, all the blatant authoritarianism, the stifling uniformity and groupthink? Look, I'll break it to you. You aren't exactly at risk of finding yourself at the Salem witch trials here, okay? And the Spanish Inquisition, even the Handmaid's Tale, that's like a long, long, long way off. No risk of that happening within these four walls for quite a while. Instead, I'd say you are more statistically at risk of loneliness, of social isolation, of spending way too much time by yourself in front of some digital screen. That's what you're probably more at risk of if you're like me. So coming like belonging to a faith community now, again, it's not going to be about here's a uniform, have a good time. It's not going to be about that. It's going to provide you more antidotes against this kind of stuff. And I know it's the party line these days to say that faith and spirituality is a private and personal thing, which is kind of true, but it's kind of also not true. At least with the classic, long-standing, verified, if you like, world faiths and religions, there's always presented spirituality as having a communal element. Traditions, rituals, wisdom, discipleship. These are all undertaken with others and often those who have gone before us. So you're never actually starting from scratch in terms of a spiritual journey, if that makes sense. And that does make sense, right? It's like if you wanted to be good at AFL, you'd join a team and play with other people, right? You wouldn't just hang in the bedroom and watch the YouTube videos. If you want to be like a good mother or father, you join the mums groups and the fathers groups and you learn from other people, yeah? If you want to be like an electrician, you get an apprenticeship. You learn from people who are more experienced than you and you learn alongside them, yeah? Why should church be any different? Why should be the faith journey developing? Why should that be any different? If you want to improve at learning more about and following Jesus, then please, chances are church will be a good place for you to find yourself in. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any concerns about anything I've said, if you'd like to start following Jesus today or recommit your life to him and following him, please, I'll be around at this pew. Other people will be down here at this pew after the service. Come down, because we would love to talk with you. We'd love to pray with you if that's something that you'd like to. Thanks, and let me say a quick prayer now. Father, we thank you. We thank you for the gospel accounts of your Son. We thank you for the reality of his resurrection. And we thank you about the bracing honesty that we read there, that people, even then, found it incredulous. But thank you most of all that you meet us where we are. Thank you that if we act in good faith, Father, you will just be so gracious to stoop down and meet us. And I pray everyone here will just be a little bit more convicted of that today, Father. And if they find themselves looking for you, wanting to pursue you, that you will be readily found. Amen.